It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 31, looking at the groups and teams of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is looking at Group A, Morocco, Mali, Zambia, and Comoros. Here we go! It's the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. It's Series 31, and I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. And today we're looking at Group A for the 2025 African Cup Tournament. This group is made up of Morocco, Mali, Zambia, and Comoros.
Yeah, just a note on where we're at in our mediacasts. After previewing the preliminary stage for World Cup 2026 qualifying for the Asian region, we decided it was going to be too ambitious to attempt to preview all the regions in qualification. So we've had to decide to restrict ourselves to the tournament themselves. Last summer, we did preview the groups, teams, and players for the 2025 CONCACAF Gold Cup.
We also did a media cast introducing ourselves. It covers some of the priorities and quirks of what we do. It also has a quiz, which is still alive. Winners will get a mention on the media cast covering the team of their choice.
That's right. And after this African Cup, we're going to be tackling the massive 48-team World Cup in the summer of 2026. So stay tuned for previews of that. We'll be starting in the springtime of 2026.
Yeah, so let's look at the three sections of this media cast in outline.
Yeah, in part one, we'll introduce the teams in the group, giving the location and population of each one.
In part two, we'll do an overview of each team's history and recent form. That's for both the World Cup and African Cup of Nations.
Right, the Regional Cup. And in part three, we'll be comparing the teams in terms of ranks, head-to-head records, and the chances of each team. So we're going to end with a discussion of their prospects and our predictions. All right, well, before we begin, Connor, can you tell me something that'll get us into the group?
You bet. So for this group, each of the four teams topped their qualifying groups. So maybe I'll put it to you, Kevin. Do you think momentum in that way will have an influence on this group?
I think, honestly, it's the most interesting group. I haven't really gone into as much detail on the other ones, but I do think there's momentum that could upset the apple cart here.
All right.
All right, let's go into part one then, and we'll just look at some information about the countries and teams here, beginning with Morocco.
Yeah, so Morocco are the hosts of this tournament. Morocco is a mid-sized African country located in the northwest of the continent, on the edge of the Sahara Desert, to just south of Spain. It has a population of 38 million people, which is 11th largest in Africa. And their nickname is the Atlas Lions.
The Atlas Lions.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Let's move on to the next team then, Mali.
So Mali's a large landlocked country in the Western Sahara region of North Africa, just south of Algeria and a little bit south of Morocco, although they're not neighbors. It has a population of 24 million people, and their nickname is the Eagles.
All right, so just a little bit smaller than Morocco, or about 2/3 the size. Third, we have Zambia.
Yes, Zambia. This is another mid-sized country located in South Central Africa. It's south of the Democratic Republic of Congo, north of Botswana and Zimbabwe. It's a landlocked country that actually borders 8 other countries in total, so right in the middle of that southern part of Africa. Zambia has a population of 21 million people, and their nickname, this is a good one, it's the Copper Bullets.
All right. Well, Zambia used to be called Northern Rhodesia, right? Or is it's Northern Rhodesia?
Yeah, I know Zimbabwe was Rhodesia, so yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So whenever I think of that, I think of Cecil Rhodes and diamond mines. Next, Comoros, probably a little known country to a lot of people.
Definitely. It's a tiny country. It's the third smallest by area in Africa, and it comprises a set of islands in the Indian Ocean that lie about halfway between Mozambique and the north end of Madagascar. In
Wow.
terms of population, it's also tiny. It's 850,000. So that's 51st or fourth smallest in Africa, and they are the smallest team by population competing in this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, just a tiny country there. So let's look at them kind of together by comparison. I think actually I forgot to put the numbers, but maybe you can fill me in here, Connor.
I'll just mention the nickname for Comoros. This one is too good to pass up.
Oh, yeah.
It's the coelacanths. And that's a fish which is basically a living fossil that lives in the surrounding waters of Comoros.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Probably the most obscure nickname in all of football, I would
Yeah,
hazard.
yeah. I think if that comes up on a trivia quiz, we're going to look pretty clever. All right. Let's look at them together then. I think you said Morocco had 38 million.
38 million, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mali next was 24 million.
24 million.
Zambia was 21.
21.
And Comoros is under a million, so 850,000.
Okay, I'm going to say less than a million. Okay, now I'm going to readjust the size of the flags to kind of represent the size of these countries. So we're going to make Comoros basically as small as we can. We'll make Morocco a bit bigger, and Zambia will reduce a little bit. So actually in pot order, the size of the countries. Any surprises for you there, Connor?
No, just not really surprises, but for Comoros, you just are always amazed when a country of that small a population can compete and, even in qualifying, better countries with vastly larger populations. So it's always a credit to those small countries that do qualify.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to looking into their history here because Comoros basically strikes me as a very weak country, and I think others along with me will kind of say, how did they get here?
Yeah.
Although they did qualify in 2021. Okay, well, let's move on to section 2, and we begin with just an overview of the team's participation and major achievements. And I just want to say that the graphic, if you're looking at YouTube, might look a little full of information here. It is. Basically, I'm urging you to look at the colors at this point during the overview. We'll look at it in more detail lately, but throughout this podcast, basically red represents an unsuccessful result, blue a middling one, and green a success. So don't worry if you can't read all the figures. We'll look at them in more detail soon. Okay, do you want to start us off with Morocco's participation and achievements?
Sure. So Morocco played their first international game in 1957 and began qualifying in 1962 for the World Cup after joining the general African boycott of the World Cup in 1966. Morocco then participated consistently from 1970. African Cup participation got off to a rocky start, not participating in the first two editions, withdrawing in 1962, and then joining the first in 1963, however, not entering 3 of the 5 subsequent tournaments. So only from 1976 did they participate consistently. One note is that they were disqualified in 2015 from the African Cup due to them withdrawing from hosting.
Well, here they are hosting here.
Yeah.
And in terms of achievement, Morocco have reached the World Cup 6 times, and they came close 3 times besides that. They passed both groups, they passed the group stage twice there in 1986 and in 2022. However, their African Cup record is less impressive. They have 5 finishes in the top 4. That includes second place in 2004 and a title win way back in 1976. However, it's really generally weak results outside of that. both before and after that second place result in 2004, they've been almost invariably knocked out at the group stage if they reach the cup at all. This has been rectified with passing the group stage in recent years, but the quarterfinals is their best finish. Let's move on to their World Cup history. So we zoom in a little bit here.
So Morocco reached the World Cup in 1970, 1986, and twice in a row in 1994 and 1998, and then finally again in 2018 and 2022. They came very close on their first try in 1962 in the sense that they made it out of Africa, but they then faced a playoff with Spain and had little chance. That was as close as any African or Asian team came to the 1962 Cup, and sheds light on why the two confederations boycotted the following edition. That boycott guaranteed Africa one place among the 16 teams in the 1970 World Cup, and Morocco's second qualification campaign saw them take it. It took until 1986, 4 cups later, to succeed again, and there they passed the group stage, the first African team to do so.
Yes.
A terrible campaign in 1990 saw them finish bottom of the group in round 1 of 2, but they reached the following 2 cup with only 1 loss over the 2 qualifying campaigns. They fell just short of the following 2 cups, but sank even further after that, finishing last in the final round in 2010 and not even reaching that stage in 2014. 2018 saw them reaching the cup for the first time since 1998, and we'll take a look at their successful campaign in 2022.
Great. Okay, that is the quick view of the World Cup. Let's move on to a quick view of the Regional Cup, the African Cup there, and see how they've done there.
Yeah, the African Cup was established in 1957, but Morocco was virtually absent in the early years, entering only 2 of the first 7 editions. It took until 1972 to reach their first cup, and they were knocked out in the group stage. After not entering in 1974, they shocked in 1976 by winning the title. It would be their only title, but it did initiate a strong period in the competition, even if that period did include 2 non-qualifications. Otherwise, it was a 3rd place finish in 1980 and 4th in both 1986 and 1988, hosting providing some advantage in the latter. This was followed by a weak period, failing to qualify for 3 of the next 4 cups, even for the expanded edition to 16 teams in 1996. But that expansion ultimately helped, as from 1998, they regularly qualified, failing only once again in 2010, although they were disqualified in 2015, as we mentioned. In 1998, they reached the quarterfinals, and 2004 saw them finish 2nd. Otherwise, they were knocked out at the group stage in 6 of 8 tournaments between 2000 and 2013.
Wow.
It took 13 years for them to again pass the group stage when they did so in 2017. That, together with the World Cup qualification after a long absence, suggested they were heading into a period of strength, and that proved true as they have passed the group stage every time since. However, their 2022 result is not mirrored here, as the quarterfinals, just the top 8, is their best finish in recent periods.
Right, so they'll be looking to correct that here. So we're going to go back to the original graphic, the one that's kind of hard to see, as we finish with an overview of their summary and strength. So Morocco's current period is actually their strongest. In truth, despite smattering successes, only 1986 can really be considered another strong period. Passing the group stage of the World Cup there and finishing in the top 4 in 2 African Cups in a row gave 3 strong results across 2 competitions. And as impressive as that current period seemed, or as this current period seems now, it doesn't really reflect in African Cup results beyond consistently passing the group stage and reaching, as you put it, the top 8. So beyond these 2 periods, and perhaps 1976 to 1980, which actually did see their title win and a 3rd place finish across 3 African Cups, I didn't really include that in their strong periods because there's nothing in the World Cup in that period. But apart from those successes, they haven't been a top-tier team. They particularly struggled in the early years, as we saw, and from 2000 to 2017, they failed to reach the World Cup 4 times in a row and were knocked out at the group stage in almost all of the African Cups.
Yeah, interesting perspective. I mean, obviously the strong teams we think tend to be strong throughout history, but not the case with Morocco, even looking at just this, the last couple decades.
You're right. I think it's important to keep in mind that they are in a really good period right now, but it is kind of a surge in their overall history. Let's move into recent then. We're basically going to look at the most recent competition in the World Cup and in the African Cup, as well as the qualifying campaigns for the 2 most recent Cups. So we're going back here to 2022, the World Cup, and reviewing how they did there.
Yeah, so 2022 World Cup started in the second round of qualifying, round 1 being a preliminary round, and they won all their games over Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, and Sudan to finish a distant first in round 2 of 3. They were imperious, and the campaign was uneventful in terms of games, but they did travel to Guinea only to find themselves waking up the next day to gunfire in the streets and civil war.
That's right.
The final playoff round proved as easy, tying the away leg and easily winning the home leg over Congo DR to advance to the Cup. So we'll talk about the World Cup itself. Here they tied Croatia in the tournament opener, but finished first in the group stage after wins over a poor Belgium and then also Canada.
Ouch!
That hurt. Morocco then beat Spain on penalties and Portugal, 2 near neighbors for them. Beating Portugal on a single goal before falling to France in the semi-final, and then they lost to Croatia to finish in 4th place. But it was a glorious campaign, and they were, of course, the first African team to reach this semi-finals of a World Cup.
Yeah, so they have a couple of plaudits there as far as African teams go, the first to pass the group stage and the best record of all. So, yeah, a tremendous performance there. Let's see if they kept it going in the African Cup. Well, it's a 2023 African Cup, but was actually played at the beginning of 2024.
Yeah. In terms of qualifying, they lost away in South Africa, but won the group by beating Liberia twice, where South Africa tied them once, and then Zimbabwe were disqualified. They were very strong in the group stage of the tournament, beating Tanzania and Zambia, as well as tying a well-performing Congo DR to finish first in the group stage. But they lost to South Africa in the round of 16, on the verge of tying at the 85th minute, only to have everything fall apart. So what do you make of that, following up from their World Cup run?
Yeah, I mean, that was an amazing ending. I recommend looking at it on YouTube. I think they got a penalty. I can't remember exactly how it went, but it was, I think they were on the verge of taking a penalty to tie it up, and they missed a penalty and then made a terrible defensive mistake. But South Africa doing it again, because they did that to Egypt in 2019 when Egypt were hosting the Cup. So, or it might have been 2020, 2021. Anyway, South Africa kind of chopping teams down.
Yeah. Yeah, disappointing for sure.
Yeah, so that was a pretty poor follow-up to the 2022 World Cup, but they were pretty imperious in qualifying for both of those, and let's see if they kept up at least that qualifying record in the qualification for the 2025 African Cup.
Yeah, a bit strangely, they went through qualification even though they were hosting the tournament and got automatic entry. But they were imperious once again, winning all their games and finishing first in the qualifying group, coming up with a goal record of 26 goals scored, 2 conceded over 6 games. the opposition being Gabon, Lesotho, and Central African Republic.
Yeah. Yeah, so all of those wins except one by 3-goal margins. That's a pretty convincing performance. So we'll have to see whether they can live up to that in the cup, and that'll be part of the discussion later on. But let's take a look at World Cup qualifying, which has only just concluded, and see if they remained in good form there.
Well, the trend continues of Morocco steamrolling through qualifying. They, again, won every game. That's 8 out of 8. Their opposition here was Tanzania, Zambia, who they meet in this group, Congo, and Niger, with Eritrea being a 6th team, but they withdrew, I guess, and so none of the games counted. They only had the 5 teams instead of 6.
Yeah,
so they are going to the World Cup in North America next year.
Yeah, and I heard that somewhere in this qualification run, they beat a record that Spain held. I thought that record was the most wins in qualification, but I see there in the 2023 qualifying campaign, they did lose in South Africa. So perhaps the record is the most home wins. But anyway, it does speak to their strength at home.
Yeah, and it means over the last 4 qualifying campaigns, they won all their games but one, which is astonishing.
Yeah, now I should say they do have the advantage of playing some of their away games in home in Morocco. It's kind of become a hub for qualification games, and a lot of teams like Guinea, if they can't play in their home country for whatever reason, or playing in Morocco. So it does give Morocco a bit of an advantage there.
Yeah.
All right, that is a look at their recent history, and we are done for the time being with Morocco. We move on to our second team, Mali. How do you pronounce it, by the way? Mali?
Yeah, I might say Mali, but I'm not sure if that's correct.
Yeah. Anyway, and once again, we kind of do a big overview where really you just kind of look at the colors to view their success, but we'll look at it in more detail as we go. So I'm going to pass it over to you for a review of their participation and achievements.
So Mali played its first international game in 1960. They have a short history in World Cup qualification. Their first qualification campaign was 2002, having withdrawn in the general boycott of 1966, and then in 1994 and 1998, not entering any cups in between. They have consistently participated since 2002, though. On the other hand, they have a long history in the African Cup, participating from 1965 with only 3 absences: 1978 when they were disqualified, 1980 when they did not enter, and 1998 when they withdrew.
Yeah, and I think that's 1988 when they withdrew. I made a mistake in the text there. Yeah, so that's a bit unusual right there, Connor. A good participation and a long history in the African Cup, but fairly new to the World Cup. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, it does. Usually, either the regional World Cup will be first, but that's a very long delay between them. It's definitely unusual.
Yeah, it is. Let's talk about their achievements. In terms of achievement, Mali is as different in performance as they are in participation between those two competitions. They have never reached a World Cup, and their weakness in qualifying pales to their African Cup record. Only in the 2014 World Cup campaign did they catch up with competitive performances, and that saw them finish in the top half of the table for the first time. The African Cup was also fairly weak from their first entry, really from 1965 to 2000. They reached the competition only once in 1972. They made the best of it, though, that year with a second-place finish. From 2002, they've qualified with remarkable consistency. They only failed to do so in 2006, and even that result the qualifying campaign was the same as for the World Cup campaign. So really, it wasn't an African Cup qualification, in fact, you know. As in 1972, they have impressed once reaching the Cup, not only passing the group stage more than half the time, but finishing in the top four times. That's two third-place finishes in 2012 and 2013 are their best results there.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah, it is. So we're looking at a fairly weak World Cup record and a strong African Cup record. Let's look at the World Cup in a bit more detail.
Yeah, well, Mali has Mali has reached the final round of World Cup qualification in 4 of their 6 campaigns, but finishing second last or lapsed in the group stage every time except for 2022. So that's a weak campaigns, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, 2010 had been their best performance, losing only at home to Ghana. However, too many draws caused them to finish third behind Benin. The same problem emerged in 2018 when they tied 4 of their 6 games, including Morocco and Ivory Coast at home, but they finished last in the group behind Gabon. Their struggle in World Cup play continues even until 2026, when they entered as a pot 1 team but finished third, and we'll look at that a bit later. So no World Cups for Mali so far.
Yeah, and looked like their record was catching up in 2022, but then the most recent campaign, a bit of a disappointment. Quite different, though, in African Cup play. Maybe you can take us through that.
Yeah, so while the World Cup record portrays them as a weak team, their African Cup is far better, at least in points. In fact, they only reached the Cup twice in 15 tries between 1965 and 2000. But they finished second in 1972 and fourth in 1994, so doing well once there. Since 2002, however, they've only failed to reach the Cup once, and they maintain their record of reaching the semifinal. They maintain their record of reaching the semifinal every time they competed in 2002 and 2004, a record which finally fell in 2008 when they were knocked out at the group stage. But after another group stage finish in 2010, they finished third in both 2012 and 2013. They were knocked out at the group stage in the following 2 editions, but since the expansion of the Cup in 2019, they've passed the group stage every time, with a quarterfinal finish in 2023.
Right, so pretty interesting difference there. We'll go back to the kind of the overall view here and finish with a comment on their general strength and a summary. So, yeah, Mali is a strange team in their bipolarities there. A short and unsuccessful history in World Cup and a long history with some impressive results in the African Cup. They didn't often reach the African Cup before 2008, but as we saw, when they did, they finished invariably in the top 4. Every time they passed the group stage, which was 5 times, they reached the top 4. Even when they were knocked out at the group stage, they were almost every time tied with the second place finisher. Ultimately, though, they are more of a third-tier team overall, or a third-tier team certainly in World Cup play, and a second-tier team in African Cup play, which includes in its definition passing the group stage of the now expanded African Cup, but really not getting far beyond that. They can be credited with consistency in their good African Cup qualification runs, but it did tend to be against second-tier opponents or lower. In fact, when they do run into top-tier teams, they usually don't fare that well. And we'll see if that bears out in our look at the recent history. So we're going to go back to the World Cup 2022 there.
Yeah, so they received a bye over the round 1 preliminary round, and then they had excellent consistency in the main round of qualifying, a group stage, suffering only a draw in Uganda but beating Kenya and Rwanda twice to finish first in round 2 of 3. That set them up with into the playoffs, and they faced Tunisia in what was the easiest playoff pairing of the final round, but they lost the series on a single goal in the first leg, that being the home leg, where the unfortunate youngster Musa Sissoko both scored an own goal at 36 minutes and then took a red card at 40. And do you remember that own goal, Kev?
Oh, I feel so sorry for that guy. I actually am keeping an eye out here once I do the player podcast to see how he has fared since, because that's got to be hard for him to take.
Yeah, the own goal I remember was a back pass to his keeper, and it
Yeah.
went directly in
Oh,
under very little pressure. And for that to be the only goal in a two-legged aggregate series, I'm sure he would probably have rather have lost 3-0 than that be the deciding goal.
yeah, yeah. In Korean, they have an expression, "Soksangheo." It means I'm rotting from the inside. Wow, that's the World Cup 2022. So that really is their only competitive World Cup campaign, as we've seen. Let's look at the African Cup in 2023, where they tend to do better.
Yeah, they finished first in the qualifying group, dropping points only in an away loss to Gambia, with an easy qualifying group together with Congo and South Sudan. So that took them to the Cup. And once there, they beat South Africa in their opener, then tied Tunisia and Namibia, enough to finish first in a competitive group stage. They beat Burkina Faso in a classic match. They beat Burkina Faso, but in a classic match in their next round with host Ivory Coast, they lost in extra time of the quarterfinal. A heartbreaking loss from what was a pretty good run.
Yeah, and second time in a row, I think maybe even the third time in a row that they faced Tunisia in the group stage there. That one wasn't as dramatic as 2021, where the ref ended the game early. But they have a bit of a history with Tunisia, but they don't face them in this cup.
Against Ivory Coast, they gave up an equalizer in the 90th minute and lost on a winning goal in 120+2. So truly a heartbreaking way to exit a tournament.
It really was, and I got to say, Ivory Coast, and actually this will come up a bit later in the conversation, Ivory Coast really not deserving a win in that tournament that they hosted, but squeaked through there and elsewhere, did the Ivory Coast. Okay, let's look at qualifying for this tournament here.
Yeah, so qualifying started with a home draw against Mozambique, but after that, they won all their games except for a draw in Guinea-Bissau to finish first in the group, otherwise beating Eswatini twice. So maybe not the strongest group, but they did well to top it, and that's why they're here.
Yeah, and fairly comfortable win, 3 points over Mozambique there. So their strong African Cup performances continue, but I've already hinted that their World Cup kind of fell back. Here, let's look at their most recent World Cup campaign, which just finished recently.
Yeah, so Mali were the pot one team, ahead of Ghana, who were also in their group. A bit unlucky, actually, for them to draw Ghana because they could have drawn someone weaker. Ghana, historically a pot one team. But their poor World Cup form continued. They finished third of 6 in the qualifying group, behind both Ghana and Madagascar. The only 2 games they lost were to Ghana, but ties with pot 4 Central African Republic left them 1 point behind Madagascar, who bested them. Do you feel that's a blown opportunity for them?
No, I don't. It's really just a return to the World Cup form. I mean, a bit unlucky. Ghana had been conversely poor in African Cup play, which is why they were the pot 2 team. But Madagascar was stronger than expected in this, and Central African Republic are not a terrible team. Really, this isn't a terrible qualification. They're barely a pot 1 team, I would say.
Yeah, they did win 6 of their 10 games, but it was 5 of their 10 games, only losing twice, as I mentioned. But Ghana won 8, so they were off the pace.
Yeah. Well, that does continue the narrative of poor World Cup performances there. They'll be hoping their strong narrative in African Cup continues, and we'll talk about that more when we get to the discussion. But let's move on to our third team here, Zambia. Connor, I think you know that Zambia is my favorite African team.
I know you have a soft spot for them.
All right. Well, let's begin with a broad overview, their participation and achievements.
So Zambia has consistently entered both World Cup and African Cup qualifying since 1970. They have since never failed to participate in World Cup qualification and withdrew only once in the African Cup in 1988. They are also members of COSAFA, the Council of Southern African Football Associations, made up of 13 countries in Southern Africa, and they've never missed any of its 25 editions since 1997.
Yeah, in this series, we're largely going to ignore the local cups, which we did cover last time for the previous African Cup. But I do want to mention it for Ghana and a couple of other countries later on, because I think it plays into the narrative. But COSAFA there, the group that they're in Southern Africa. Let's talk about their achievements. It seems like every 20 years or so, Zambia rises up to a good period. They've never reached the World Cup, but they were close in 1974 and even closer in 1994. And those 2 years do parallel good showings in the African Cup. They came second in 1974 and second in 1994 as well. While 74... was a fairly isolated success, as was a third place finish in 1982. 1994 was a more sustained period of strength that saw them reach the semi-finals in 3 out of 4 African Cups. All the more impressive and poignant because their entire team was killed in a plane crash in the midst of it, or actually in the midst of a World Cup qualification campaign for the 1994 Cup. That was in 1992 where the plane crash happened. So 20 years later, in the 2012 African Cup, they were motivated by the remembrance of that, and they won the title and happened to win it in Gabon, which is where the disaster took place. So unlike 1974 and 1994, in this period in 2012, there was no reflection of that strength in World Cup play. A competitive campaign for the 2018 World Cup is a good recent showing in that competition, and they have had some good qualifications recently in African Cup play, which we'll take a look at. All right, let's move on though to a bit of a closer look at the World Cup there.
Sure. So 1994 was our closest approach to the World Cup, a touching story because of the Gabon air disaster, the plane crashing en route to a qualifier against Senegal. The new team amazingly completed the qualification, missing USA 1994 by finishing just 1 point behind Morocco. That had been only the second time they reached the final round of qualification, having done so in 1974, though they finished far behind the group winner, also Morocco, that time. After 1994, though, they reached the final round in every edition except for 2014 and 2022, but were outclassed once there, finishing in the bottom half every time. That should have been the case in 2018, given the tough group they were in with Algeria, Nigeria, and Cameroon.
Oof, what a group.
Yeah. However, they surprised, as they sometimes do, by finishing second. It was not very close to reaching the cup, though, as they finished 5 points behind Nigeria.
All right, well, that is the World Cup for Zambia, and let's take a look at the Regional Cup, or the African Cup here.
So Zambia failed to reach most of the early African Cups involved in the tournament in only 4 of the 10 editions before 1990. They did sometimes surprise, though, finishing second in 1974 and third in 1982. 1974 was a brief spike in their form, paralleling a good year in World Cup qualification, but the 1990s began a legitimate good period, amazingly, as we said, not interrupted by that air disaster in 1993. They finished in the top 3 of 4, in the top 3 of 4 times from 1990 to 1996, finishing second in 1994. They continued to reach the tournament consistently, missing only in 2004, but after 1996, they were knocked out at the group stage every time until 2010. Reaching the quarterfinals in 2010 for the first time in 14 years was the only indication of what was to come in 2012. Motivated, as you said, by the tournament being in Gabon, the site of the disaster, they were managed by Hervé Renard, a well-known African coach.
Renard.
Yes, to an unlikely victory. Following that glorious year, though, they were knocked out at the group stage in the following 2 cups, and then failed to reach 3 cups in a row from 2017 to 2021, something that never happened in their history. They reached the cup again in 2023 and 2025, but haven't passed the group stage since their title win in 2012. And maybe because I know you're a fan, you can reflect on that 2012 win, because it was really out of the blue in most senses.
Yeah, I mean, they had a good campaign in 2010, but I really think the moment was created by the Gabon air disaster and the memory of it. But it kind of all came together with Hervé Renard being their coach. I was going to ask you if you know where Hervé Renard has coached since then.
He's coached a couple, including Morocco,
Mm-hmm.
and is now at Saudi Arabia, I believe.
Yeah. So he was part of the Gold Cup recently. We always seem to be stumbling across Hervé Renard there. Why do you have thoughts on the 2012 Cup victory?
No, just that it was amazing. You look at the teams that have won it, Algeria, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Egypt, really big teams. And Zambia kind of maybe surprised people with them reaching a bunch of, getting to the semifinals 3 out of 4 times in the early 90s. But for them to go on and win it, a team that never has even been to a World Cup, I think was quite a story. They beat Ivory Coast in the final too. So kind of their name stands out as, a smaller country to have won this tournament in recent years.
Yeah, and it is part of the reason I'm a fan of them. Not only that, it's just the way they kind of pop up with great performances once in a while. Ivory Coast was at a peak of strength at that time, so it was kind of a glorious final.
Yeah, that was Ivory Coast kind of great golden generation too.
Yeah. So it's a great memory in my mind. But they do have 2 second place finishes besides there, so they, as we said, kind of pop up every 20 years or so. I guess I have 10 years to wait if that's going to be the case. Let's finish with an overview of their summary and strength. And so Zambia is mostly a 3rd-tier team, but they have had brief periods of top or 2nd-tier level play, as we said, roughly every 20 years. The African Cup title win in 2012, clearly motivated by remembrance of the 1994 air disaster. I say that because it's related to the 1994 World Cup, but it was actually in 1992. And we saw that was their most sustained strong period, despite having to replace almost the entire team. Connor, I think there was one player who was taking a different route to Senegal. So a survivor's guilt, I'm sure he suffered.
Mm-hmm.
A single good result in both competitions in 1974 completes the 20-year argument. And then in 1982, 2018, and in a recent qualification, they rose up for strong performances, but just for single campaigns. However, the fact that they can spike like that makes them a bit unpredictable. And so while they are, for the most part, a 3rd-tier team and not really a contender for the World Cup, they struggle to reach the African Cup, knocked out at the group stage usually if they do. But again, that kind of factor of being able to spike up and put in a good performance makes them an interesting team.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, I'll just mention the local cup. We're not delving into performances into local cups in this series, but suffice to say that their inconsistency and unpredictability is quite evident there too. So we saw at the beginning they're part of COSAFA, or one of the South African locality teams. And that group includes South Africa, who do host the tournament, but who usually field a B team. Zambia won 3 out of 4 of the COSAFA Cups from 2019 to 2023, but they have been knocked out at the group stage in the last 2 editions. So you talked about momentum at the beginning. I don't know if that momentum from winning 3 COSAFA Cups out of 4 still applies. What do you think?
Yeah, they're very different teams, but maybe a better guide would be their qualification for this Cup and the World Cup, which we'll look at.
Yeah, I mean, it is over kind of or shortly after that period that we're looking. So let's get into the recent one and begin with the World Cup in 2022. This was right in the midst of those 3 COSAFA Cup titles.
Yeah, so they entered the second round as a 2nd seed, but they were bested by 4th seed Equatorial Guinea. They also lost to Algeria twice and beat Mauritania twice to finish 3rd in round 2, but only the 1st place team advanced. So that was the end of their World Cup bid.
Right, and I think you said Algeria there, but it was Tunisia, right?
Yes, Tunisia, that's right.
Okay, well, Equatorial Guinea, a pretty decent team too. Let's go to the African Cup in 2023 and see if they did any better.
Yeah, so they exchanged home wins with Ivory Coast and otherwise only suffered a draw in their final game against Comoros, but they nevertheless finished 1st in the qualifying group ahead of Ivory Coast in their head-to-head goal difference. In the Cup, they tied Congo DR and Tanzania, but their loss to Morocco saw them finishing 3rd in the group stage and also last among 3rd-place finishers. That allowed Ivory Coast to advance as the weakest 3rd-place finisher, but then go on to win their home tournament.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, that we are seeing some of the teams that they're playing here. A tie with Comoros there in qualifying, or actually besting them in qualifying there, but losing to Morocco in the finals. And throughout this, we're going to see those teams pop up. But a very good group stage there, and I think that was the one we were referring to as their good recent result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they can pop up. Let's see if they did that. Well, they're here in the tournament, so we can say they did that in qualifying again.
And strangely, there was the same result as in 2023 qualifying, where they finished 1st ahead of Ivory Coast, this time a point better. That's 13 points. Here, too, they lost to Ivory Coast in their opener, but otherwise suffered a disappointing draw, in this case, a home draw with Chad, as their only other blemish, beating Sierra Leone twice, so topping the group to get here.
Yeah, Chad always seems to get a result like that in each of their campaigns. Zambia a victim this time, but it didn't cost them. So two wins over over Ivory Coast in qualifying. So they do have some power. Let's see if they showed it in the World Cup 2026 qualifying.
Yeah, disappointingly, they didn't. They entered as a pot 2 team behind Morocco, but they finished 4th of 5 in the qualifying group, Eritrea having withdrawn. Morocco, Niger, and Tanzania finished ahead, and among them, Zambia only managed an away win in Tanzania. Behind them was Congo, who they beat at home in their opener, and then were awarded the away leg. So that's where the 9 points came from, but 3 wins, 1 by default, and 5 losses was disappointing given the strength of their African Cup qualifying campaigns.
Yeah, and also given the strength of this group, that is a group where you could see them finishing 2nd.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, they're not coming into this tournament on a great note there, but we'll have to see if they can put it together a little better than they did in the World Cup. Meanwhile, we move on to Comoros and an overview of their participation and achievement.
So though their first game was in 1979, they didn't join CAF until 2003 and FIFA until 2005. So they're a relative newcomer. Mm-hmm. Even despite that, their first qualification run was the 2010 World Cup. There were further delays to actually participating, and the first qualification for both cups was in 2010. Their participation has been steady in each since, with the exception of not entering the 2013 African Cup. They participated consistently.
Yeah. Well, in terms of achievement, they really were very weak until reaching the 2021 African Cup. That was very unexpected. We'll get a taste of why as we go here. And even more so in that cup, beating Ghana in the third match to reach the round of 16. 2025 then makes it their second appearance at the African Cup. And that these qualifications were unexpected is illustrated by their weak World Cup record, where they struggled to pass the preliminary stage. Only in 2018 did they do so, but then in 2022 they once again fell in a preliminary round. 2026 had no preliminary round, and so we'll see how they performed there. African Cup campaigns were also weak until 2019, I'll say until 2019. But 2021 was a particularly strong campaign, and they've been fairly competitive since. Again, we'll look at their recent record soon. But we'll go back and take a bit of a closer look at the World Cup record there.
So in their first World Cup qualification campaign in 2010, they lost both legs by full 4-goal margins to neighbors Madagascar, and were out equally quickly in 2014 at the hands of Mozambique. 2018 showed improvement as they passed the first round by narrowly coming out ahead after 2 draws with the weak Lesotho, and then tying Ghana in the first game of round 2 before losing away. 2022 saw them again knocked out in a preliminary round, but 2026, as you mentioned, had no preliminary round. And we'll look at that campaign where they once again had the opportunity to terrorize Ghana. We'll tell that story. In short, though, they remain very far from reaching the World Cup.
Yeah, they do. Okay, well, let's take a look at the African Cup again, their first tournament there in 2010.
All right, so they have been knocked out of a couple African Cups in preliminary stage in 2010 and 2015. But for the most part, qualification has not had them, and they've played in a group stage. Up to and including 2019, though, they finished bottom of these groups, which made 2021 such a surprise. Perhaps going undefeated in 2019, tying Cameroon and Morocco at home, was a foreshadowing, even if they did finish last. But they repeated the solid home record, tying Egypt, and earned some points on the road to finish second and reach the cup.
In 2021,
2021, tying Egypt in a particularly impressive result.
Yeah, they really have some impressive results at home. They've tied, we saw Cameroon, Morocco, Egypt. It gets even better.
Yeah, in the cup, they proved competitive, losing by small margins to Gabon and Morocco, then taking Ghana by surprise in the third game, winning at a goal at 85 minutes to knock them out and advance in third. The round of 16 game was memorable in that they had no goalkeeper due to COVID and injuries, and they had to play with a defender in net.
Yeah.
A red card 7 minutes in further hampered them, but they came out with a respectable 2-1 loss. Totally respectable in the circumstances.
Yes, can you imagine the terror of that defender facing Vincent? Why is his name eluding me? Anyway, facing Abubakar, and facing Cameroon in general.
Yeah.
But they came out of it okay.
Their 2023 campaign saw them fail to reach the cup due to one of Zambia's intermittent spikes in form. But in 2025, they went undefeated home and away to finish first in the group ahead of Tunisia.
Oh, well, we gave it away there, but yes, a very good performance in qualifying for this cup. And we'll just finish with an overview of their summary and strength here before we look at those recent tournaments. And Comoros has a short history, of course. They're only involved in play since 2010. They were very weak at first in both competitions, struggling to get past preliminary rounds if there were preliminary rounds, or finishing last in the group. right up until 2021. Some good individual results at the game level from 2018. That started with a tie to Ghana in 2018 World Cup qualifying, and they will prove a nemesis to Ghana, perhaps foreshadowing the improvement at the campaign level in 2021, where they reached the African Cup, as we saw, and performed competitively in it. And for the most part, they have maintained that form since, which leads us right into the 2022 World Cup here.
Yeah, so they were among the bottom 28 ranked teams required to play in the preliminary knockout round. Their FIFA ranking was 146, while Togo, who they were matched up against, were 128. They tied the first leg at home, but lost the away leg to be eliminated in the preliminary round. So not much more to say there.
Yeah, and I think they had beaten Togo in the 2021 African Cup qualifying, so it wasn't beyond them to pass that qualification. But this is a bit of a flashback to their weakness of the past. Let's see if they overcame that in 2023.
So they were not among the 12 weakest teams in the preliminary round. So they entered in the qualifying group, but they finished third of four, beating Lesotho in both legs to finish ahead of them. They tied group winner Zambia at home in their final game, but otherwise lost both to Ivory Coast as well.
Yeah, so a bit unlucky there to meet Zambia during one of their peaks of strength. They'll be hoping it won't be the same thing this time around. But let's look at their qualification campaign for this cup.
Yeah, this was a tremendous campaign, going undefeated and finishing first in the group stage, besting all teams, including Tunisia, where they won away. Madagascar and Gambia were kind of considered even strength opponents at the outset, but they took 4 points from every team. So, yes, incredible campaign.
Yeah, and as you say, like that is not an easy group at all. Gambia, Madagascar, capable of good performances. I think that's a great achievement.
Truly, yeah.
Yeah, so there's some of the momentum you were talking about coming into the cup. At first, I was a little doubtful, like, really, are Comoros a group winner coming into this cup? But there we have it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at the recent World Cup 2026 qualifying campaign.
So Comoros entered as a pot 5 team out of 6, but finished 4th of 6 in the qualifying group, ahead of pot 4 Central African Republic, who they beat home and away. They beat Ghana, there it is again, in their second game, and they were in first place after round 4, but they lost twice to second place Madagascar and third place Mali. They were consistent enough, beating pot 6 Chad in both their legs. So overall, they actually won 5 of 10 games, losing the other 5. So a respectable campaign, I would say, especially for a country of their historical stature. But 4th out of 6 is where they ended.
Right, and there we do see that Madagascar can be a strong team. They finished second in this campaign ahead of Mali, so a pretty interesting group that was. The second time we've looked at it too, of course, because we looked at it when we looked at Mali. Anyway, that brings us to the end of part 2, and now we move on to part 3, more of a direct comparison of the teams. And let's begin with the pots that they came from.
Yeah, so there were 4 pots. Morocco as hosts were kind of the top seed in pot 1, though I actually think on FIFA rankings they would have been anyways.
I think so too.
Mali were the second ranked team in pot 2, so that puts them as kind of like a top 8 team in the tournament. Zambia were third in pot 3, and Comoros were second in pot 4. So all these teams came from the top half of their pots, which shows kind of the teams grouped with them that they're relatively strong of the teams that could have been drawn out of the hat.
Yeah, and by that accounting, that would make this the toughest group, I would say, by far.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are the pots. Let's move on to their current rankings. These are actually the rankings for, I think, October 17th, the most recent rankings.
Yeah. So Morocco are 12th in FIFA and 23rd in ELO. 12th is a tremendous achievement for Morocco, buoyed by their World Cups of 2022 still. Mali are 53rd in FIFA and 59th in ELO. Zambia are 87th in FIFA and 109th in ELO, so a bit of a discrepancy there. And then Comoros are 112th in FIFA and 108th in ELO. So the most interesting thing there is that in FIFA has Zambia about 30 spots higher than Comoros, but ELO puts them basically on par with Comoros 1 spot ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, this could be the starting point of our discussion, but we have a couple of other things to look at. But yourself, which would you tend to agree with there, the FIFA or the ELO?
Yeah, I think the one Morocco's ranking, I think they are incredibly strong. For Zambia and Comoros, Zambia are such an inconsistent team that it's tough to say. Probably on recent form, I would agree with ELO in that I think they're perhaps closer than FIFA has them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're getting into our discussion there. I just want to point out that in 2015, Morocco were ranked 92nd by FIFA, so this really is a strong period for them.
Yeah.
Okay, and of course, Comoros have risen. Well, in 2015, they were 172nd, so both of those teams in the form of their lives. Really, next thing we're going to look at is head-to-head records among these teams, beginning with Morocco versus Mali.
So this is actually pretty close. Morocco has 4 wins. They've tied 3 times, and Mali has won twice.
Yeah, so a close record there. They met in 2018 World Cup qualifying, and actually Morocco humiliated Mali in the first leg, winning 6-0, and they tied 0-0 in the second leg. But again, we do know Morocco or Mali is a different team in World Cup play, much weaker.
Yeah.
Next, we have Morocco versus Zambia.
Morocco has won 9 of 15 meetings. They've tied once, and Zambia has won 5.
Yeah, so they have actually a fairly even record over history up until 1998. Then from 1998 to 2023, they didn't meet, but they have met 3 times since 2023, Morocco winning all 3 of those. So that's kind of giving them the edge in what would otherwise be a fairly even record.
Yeah.
On we go to Morocco versus Comoros. So we see Morocco has the superior record against all 3 of these teams.
Yeah, and I'll just correct it there. Morocco has 2 wins from 3 games, and they've tied once.
Good, thank you. Nice catch there. Yes, so Morocco 2-1-0 there. They first met in 2019, so all of those results are equal, but we do see that Morocco did manage to get a draw with them there in 2019.
Yeah.
Next, we look at Mali, Mali's record versus Comoros.
And this was newly established in 2026 World Cup qualifying. Mali winning both games, though.
Yeah, I'm winning them both 3-0, so a pretty convincing recent record there.
Yeah, the recency of that makes it directly relevant, you would feel.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's Zambia who actually have the better record or the better head-to-head with Mali.
Yeah, they've won 2 games and they've tied once. Mali yet to beat Zambia in a competitive match.
Yes, but they haven't met since 2006, so that is not really that relevant. And finally, we look at Zambia versus Comoros.
Yeah, so Zambia has won 3 and they've tied once in recent play.
Right, and well, their first meeting was in 2012. That was a great year for Zambia, winning both legs there. 2023, we saw that campaign again. Zambia had a bit of a high point, a bit of a spike in their form. Nevertheless, Comoros managed to get a draw. So we can see in almost every case, each team has taken points off the other, with the exception of Mali versus Comoros. Okay, the last thing we did, you know what I did here, Connor? Rather than comb the betting sites, I just asked AI to tell me the answer, and this is what they came up with. These are the odds to win the group.
All right. Well, Morocco's given 61% chance, Mali 26%, Zambia half of that at 13, and Comoros 5% chance.
Yeah, and that'll be maybe our starting point for the discussion. But I do want to point out that doesn't add up to 100%, so I'll have to criticize. I don't know if it's supposed to add up to 100%, but
well, AI is not perfect, as we all know.
Yes, I question the AI on that. But I think we saw in the ELO rankings that Zambia and Comoros were fairly close. This looks a bit more like the FIFA rankings, with Zambia almost 3 times the chance of passing the group, winning the group, than Comoros. So maybe we'll just ask if you... well, we should start with Morocco. Let's see if you agree with the 61% odds given to Morocco.
I do, and I would put it higher. I mean, we can't forget that they're playing at home here as well, which is an advantage. They are the hosts. I think Morocco is very likely to win this group. I think they, the players they can pull from, their imperious qualifying campaigns, their great run in the World Cup. I think they're the clear favorites to win this group. I would be quite surprised, frankly, to see anything otherwise. But what do you think?
Well, I do want to ask you if you think if there's any danger of them being a bit complacent with that, because they do have such a good record. We saw Ivory Coast last time. Well, we don't know what happened with Ivory Coast, but let's say they took the group stage for granted because they were hosts. Do you think there's any danger of Morocco doing that here?
I think Morocco will be aware of the Ivory Coast example as something to avoid. I think it could happen. I think Morocco is a team that will look to try and win the tournament, or at least go very far. So I do feel with some great teams, they kind of start thinking, maybe are looking down the road. I mean, you could even say Argentina in the last World Cup, they lost to Saudi Arabia. Maybe they got complacent and start thinking about the knockout stage before they're there. So it can happen. We've seen teams do that before, but I think being at home will probably help Morocco stay a little bit more focused and determined to give the fans what they want, even in the group games.
Well put. I mean, the fans who will be sitting in the stadium behind where you are recording this from.
Yes, that's right. Live from the from Rabat.
Right. Yeah, I gotta say, I agree with you. I do think there is a danger, particularly with these teams. I think Mali, Zambia, and Comoros are all kind of dangerous spoiler teams to Morocco. But as you say, I think Morocco will be aware of it. They're at home. I mean, unlike Ivory Coast, which came into their last World Cup having finished second in their qualifying group, Morocco has been imperious. So we see that they don't falter in qualifying even when they play weak teams. So I think that stands in their favor. And I think they have a lot to play for here. Perhaps in previous African Cups, they haven't really put their best foot forward. But because they're hosts here, and because they don't have a great African Cup record, even given the strength that they're at right now, I think this is the time and the place for them to make their mark in African Cup history.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, how likely do you think it is that Morocco will win the whole thing, or what do you think will be a good result that they would be satisfied with?
I think whenever you're at home, you want to go far. They come in as not only the host, but as the #1 ranked team in Africa, still buoyed by the World Cup results. They have a young team, and they've kept a lot of core players. I think they'll expect to win it, and they would be my favorites to win it. I see them getting to the final and would be my back. the team I would back to win it all.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the only thing I could see them not being disappointed is maybe a spectacular final where they lose narrowly or something like that. Otherwise, I think they'd be disappointed even with a semi-final exit from this competition.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, what about Mali? A really interesting difference there between World Cup and African Cup play, and we saw that they didn't really bring it to their recent World Cup campaign. I don't know if you had that in mind when you talked about momentum. Is that perhaps bringing negative momentum into this cup?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, until we had this conversation, I was kind of less aware of Mali's kind of dichotomy of being so strong in African Cups and so weak in World Cup play by comparison. Looking at the recent World Cup results, I would say that does work against them. But keeping in mind it is a World Cup and they're a much stronger African Cup team, I think momentum is a little bit harder to suss out for them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I gotta say, I really don't think they'll be affected by the momentum because they've always been pretty poor in World Cup play, and it really hasn't affected their African Cup play. So I would say, the momentum from the previous African Cup probably plays a bigger role than the momentum from the World Cup. It's just so dichotomized there.
Yeah. Yeah, and they did well in the last cup, a narrow quarterfinal loss. So, yeah, they'll have ambitions, of course, to go far in this tournament.
Yeah. How likely do you think they are to finish second? I don't think this 26% really speaks to that. It's a 26% chance of winning the group, and I'd agree. It is a bit lower. But the second team will pass perhaps even the third team. How likely do you think Mali is, or do you think they can be challenged by those teams below?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this is an interesting group, and you can elaborate on that more. I think they're open to challenges, to Zambia and Comoros, who if, those are teams that get hot and can pull off stunning results, and Mali could be the victim of that. I see it less likely happening against Morocco, though I think a tie is possible. So when you look at their recent results, they beat Comoros 3-0 home and away just over the last couple months. So certainly getting out of the group stage in second or third, I think, is very likely. But it's possible that they don't do it. I think the African Cup, more than other tournaments, sometimes has surprise teams doing well and surprise teams doing poorly. And I don't know. I fear Mali could perhaps do poorly, just given the disappointment of their World Cup campaign.
Yeah, I'm always a bit tentative making predictions because I mean it's almost comical how we sit here and we basically generally agree with the rankings or the general strength of the teams, and then we find Tunisia finishing last in the group or Ghana not passing the group stage, and it kind of makes me look back and wonder if our podcast or our media cast here makes any sense at all. That randomness does make it more interesting.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm not going to sit here, even though I do think Zambia and Comoros can be a threat to Mali. I'm not going to sit here and argue the case. I think we all know that it could happen and that the group could be turned upside down. But to actually predict it and say, I think that's going to happen is too much. We saw that Zambia is kind of a team that spikes, so they may or they may not. Comoros is a team that can challenge stronger teams. They may or they may not. I don't think there's enough justification to say that we think they will. But of course, we wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
Yeah, I think the World Cup or FIFA and ELO rankings are pretty instructive. Mali are considerably behind Morocco, but also considerably ahead of the other two. So, like you said, it'd be difficult to predict anything other than second, because that's really what the odds here and the rankings point to.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're fairly agreed that Mali is the favourite to win second, even though we wouldn't be shocked if they didn't. How are we going to talk about Zambia and Comoros? We could get into the mathematics of how third place works, but generally, if it's a tight group, the third place team doesn't pass. But let's say one team loses all 3 games, then the mathematics works out often that the third place team will pass.
Essentially, you need a win. About 4 of the 6 third place teams will get a victory. And if you get a victory, you're probably through. But yeah, without it, it becomes very difficult. I guess I'll ask you, yeah. Kev, do you see them like ELO as very neck and neck, or do you see them like FIFA with Zambia further ahead?
I think Zambia has I gotta say, I think I agree with ELO more on that, because Zambia is kind of unpredictable. We know that they could be strong enough to beat Mali if they're on form, but I don't know if it came out clearly in the history. But Zambia is much less often on form than they actually are. You look at a string of group stage exits in the cup, and you don't want to kind of fall into thinking that they regularly spike up with strong performances. So it's hard to say, but I mean, Comoros somehow looks a bit more solid than Zambia, whereas Zambia looks a bit more hot and cold. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with you. I think, Comoros, there's not much to pick apart in their recent qualifying campaigns. A stunning campaign for this tournament, going undefeated, and then performing quite well in what was a difficult group in World Cup qualifying, but winning 5 games shows them as capable. It's they can score goals, they can defend well. If we talk about momentum as we introduce the podcast, I see them as the team with a bit more of it. They're the smaller country, they're the underdogs, but I see them as close, and I maybe prefer Comoros to finish third.
I wouldn't completely disagree with you there. Definitely, I don't think it's what we see on the screen here. Zambia 13% chance to Comoros is 5, or almost 3 times as likely than Comoros. I would put them at least close together. As you say, teams are going to have a win, and of course, one of them, let's say, wins over each other. Do you think they can take points from Morocco and Mali to make it happen?
I don't think they'll take points from Morocco. I could see Morocco winning 3 from 3. I think Morocco are that good and have the home advantage. I do see points from Mali potentially. I'm very curious to see how those games will play out. I think they'll be close games. I think the games between Mali, Zambia, and Comoros will be competitive. A point there could prove valuable to one of these teams finishing third and getting out of the group.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do want to point out here is the order of matches, because I think it might be significant that Zambia maybe have a bit of an advantage playing Morocco in the third game, because it could be that Morocco wins their first 2 and then fields a B team for the third game. I mean, the odds are probably pretty low of that, and even if Morocco do field a weaker team, they'll still be tough to beat. But do you see anything in that?
Yeah, I mean, that can always happen. Obviously for Zambia, their best situation is Morocco having it having a nothing game to end with. I think Mali Zambia is a big game. That's the in the first round. That's a chance for either of those teams to get off on a good footing.
Yeah.
The teams that lose, if a team loses, they'll be making up ground. So, and then Zambia, Comoros, that's for each of those teams. That's their must-win game if they want to advance. They'd love to take points off Mali, I'm sure, but that's the game they really have to win to get out of the group.
All right. Well, unless you have anything else to add, I want to ask you what you think. We've talked about it in terms of Morocco, what you think teams would be satisfied with as an end result here. Comoros, I'm pretty sure, would be pretty happy to pass the group stage. What do you think for Mali and Zambia?
I think Zambia would have to be happy getting out of the group stage too. They could go in as a third place team and end up with a difficult match. Even a second place team could get a difficult match. I think they've struggled against some of the top teams, perhaps Ivory Coast aside. So I think both those teams would be happy to get out of the group. Comoros, having got out of the group in their only other tournament, would obviously like to do at least as well. And then for Mali, I think the quarterfinals is probably a place they could end their tournament. They'd like to go further. They've been to semifinals before, but I don't see that as particularly likely.
Yeah, not particularly likely, but they are a team, and Zambia to an extent are a team that once they get beyond the group stage, they tend to outperform themselves. So it'll be kind of interesting. But I do agree with you in terms of expectation. It would be a tremendous result for Mali, say, to get to the semi-finals, or for Zambia and Comoros to get to the quarterfinals. Yeah, well, a pretty interesting group. Do you have anything you want to add?
Not really. I think it will be interesting. I think for Morocco, they're going to try and use the group to set the stage for a deep run in the tournament. And I think the other ones, if there is going to be an unpredictable group, maybe this is it. So we'll see.
Yeah. How would you feel if you were Comoros playing Morocco in that opener?
I think that's just the game you get through. The hosts want to win. I mean, maybe you're on the big stage in the opening game, but that's a tough start to the tournament for Comoros.
Definitely. Well, great. Good talking to you about this, Connor, and looking forward to see how it all turns out. Once we get, we'll probably find that everything we said here is for nothing.
Yeah, Morocco finishes last. We'll see.
Right. Well, we'll see you for Group B.
See you then.
We would like to thank Pixabay and Cold Fingers for the wonderful music used in this mediacast. The title of the piece is Eid Mubarak.